Live from London, it's Plank of the Week with Mike Graham.
Mike Graham, who's he? Actually, Mike is off this week, as you may have noticed. This is another sparkling edition of his show, Plank of the Week. I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and let's get straight to our guests. First one is Will Geddes, security expert, Candice Holdsworth, a journalist, and Andre Walker, God knows what he is, but he presents... he presents the Saturday Night Talkaway right here on TalkTV, and political commentator Alice Grant. You know what we're doing? We're playing for this prestigious award. We find out who is the biggest plank of the week. We've got some very strong contenders, as always, in this episode. First up, you, Will. Who is your first nomination?
Well, you know, you'd expect me to come in hot on the first nominee, and this nominee is not going to come as probably a huge surprise because he's pretty much a regular on the show, and that is Sadiq Khan.
Yeah, he's on it more than Mike Graham.
Perpetual fan.
I think he has, yeah. I mean, bless him, Sadiq. Man of the people.
What's he done this time?
Well, you're going to love this. It's the typical hypocrisy of Sadiq, where he is flying to New York to talk about climate change. Yeah. And bearing in mind that in 2022, they estimated from a Freedom of Information request that him and his team could have lapped the world 14 times. This is a man who I see that climate change is at the forefront of his mind and something that he's very serious about combating. Again, it's hypocrisy from Sadiq, whether it be ULEZ, whether it be climate change, but this thing really does grip, you know, and grind my gears. The fact that he is constantly jumping on a plane, if it's not a bandwagon, it's one with wings. And he'll be doing his utmost to try and push his little profile, and little being the operative word, further forward as much as he possibly can.
I've got no objection to Sadiq Khan flying to New York as long as it's only a one-way ticket.
or a one-wing plane, maybe.
But yeah. Even better.
What we should do is put him on the boat with Greta Thunberg. That would be the solution.
Yeah, I mean, the point is, I agree with you. I'm sick to death of this hypocrisy of the great and the good jetting around the world to lecture us on climate change. Don't do as we do as we say. And while we're at it, I mean, I might have added Prince William to the list. He's flown over, jetted over to New York to lecture us on climate change. Enough. If you're going to lecture us on climate change, walk the walk, don't just talk the talk.
Yes, it's climate austerity for thee, but not for me.
Yeah.
And they'll often say something ridiculous like, oh, I'll plant a couple of trees to make up for it.
Well, that doesn't work.
No, it's not going to make any difference.
Actually, trees do work. It's the problem that they want to tax us. You know, why don't we plant more trees? Don't they take in CO2? It would make sense. But no, it's all about money and siphoning more money into their pockets while impoverishing the rest of the British people.
I've got to be honest with you. I've got a theory on this. I genuinely believe that these people are hypocrites in order to enforce their own superiority.
Exactly.
So they're deliberately doing it to make the point that actually, no, look, what applies to you does not apply to me. I mean, Emma Thompson, when she joined that, what was it?
Extinction Rebellion, yeah.
And she flew first class on BA.
Just flown in, first class, directly to Piccadilly Circus, boat of death.
But Kevin, you don't have to fly. She has to fly. That's her point.
I see, yes, because they're different to us.
That's absolutely right.
I think it's the fact that the general public are wising up to this. I mean, it's a bit like Oprah Winfrey in The Rock, you know, making these proclamations about everybody donating money to Hawaii and to Maui, obviously in the wake of the fires. Yet it's all coming out that they were buying up huge amounts of real estate. I think there needs to be a regular Freedom of Information request on Sadiq Khan to find out where he's spending his money when it comes to transportation, not just in flights, which is absolute BS in my book, in terms of any kind of context of climate change. But the fact is he actually using this fabulous public transport system that the rest of us are using on a day-to-day basis? I seriously doubt it. He's probably got a driver. He's probably exempt from paying congestion charge when he goes up to County Hall.
There's no way he pays any
Perfect
of
job,
exactly.
being the mayor.
I'd love him to have a hot air balloon and sort of fly around the capital.
By the way, don't
would not
forget,
be
this is the guy that flew to Los Angeles to learn all about legalising cannabis. But let's have a look at Sadiq.
The US presidential elections are the second most important elections next year. There are mayoral elections in London as well.
OK, well, we're rooting for
Well, that's Sadiq Khan, always a strong contender.
I got it, I know.
You have a strong contender as well, Candice. Kim Drakeford, the first leader of, what do they call him, the first minister of Wales. Must get his title right. Actually, he's an idiot. But what would you like to say about Mr. Drakeford?
But it's so true. He never met a draconian policy he didn't like. I mean, he was very well known in lockdown for saying that people were only allowed to buy essential products, which didn't include things like books. So there were those lovely images during the lockdown of books, children's books, being taped off in supermarkets, and people weren't able to buy kettles, they weren't able to buy clothes for their children. Don't get me started on a lockdown
I thought you were
rant.
going to say ketamine, not kettles. You can't buy ketamine.
That was probably the one thing you could get during lockdown.
I'll tell you
Yeah,
what,
exactly.
you've
That
got to
was fine. You could
You've
get
got to
that,
respect
no
the dancing,
problem.
though.
Yeah.
The dancing was good. Do you remember that? Is Diwali dancing?
You know that thing you can tell a man by, and indeed a woman, must be sexist here. You can tell a man by his friends. Guess who his best friend is? Jeremy Corbyn.
Oh, there you go.
Need I say anything more?
That would be a crap dinner party, wouldn't it?
Oh,
Well,
God.
we've taken the biscuit once again by making 20 miles per hour the default speed limit in Wales.
20 miles an hour everywhere on
Is it
main
literally
roads.
everywhere?
Yes,
Everywhere.
and if you've ever driven on one of these 20 mile per hour zones, you feel ridiculous. Honestly, you feel like you're a 95-year-old who should have their license taken away. It is the most absurd way to travel, especially on main thoroughfares. And they claim that it's saving lives. Sure, these people always give themselves a grandiose purpose to do authoritarian things.
Yeah.
But the experience for road users is becoming poorer and poorer and poorer. And there really is. There's just being a driver now is an incredibly punitive experience.
This is a dislike of motorists on the part of these left-wing politicians.
But I think
because of this reason. Because they've got this old-fashioned idea that anyone who can afford a car must be upper middle class. But it's not. It's just not true anymore. And by the way, if you want a snapshot of Mark Drakeford's Wales, now that 20 miles an hour is the generic speed limit, take a look at this. Sadiq Khan and Mark Drakeford, those kind of left-wing, far left Labour people, they hate motorists. This isn't so much a war on motorists, it's a massacre of motorists. Yeah. And it's not about clean air or cutting back accidents. It is purely driven by a dislike of car owners.
I think it's more insidious than that, if I'm honest, Kevin. I think it's more about building of their ego profile, getting as much clickbait as they can around their name. Because fundamentally, it's, like we were saying, road traffic accidents are generally created by distraction and loss of concentration by a driver. And although the impacts may be far less impacting in terms of the speed of the collision, fact of the matter is you're still going to probably have as many crashes, and that's going to impact more probably on people's insurance than it will on anything else.
I feel for the first time, when we were talking about Sadiq before, and now Mark Drakeford, I feel now ruled in a way that I never felt ruled before.
Yes.
Now
I agree.
everything is about you getting into trouble. They constantly... So Mark Drakeford happens to want you to drive more slowly. It becomes a law. Sadiq wants you to, to
get rid of
ban old cars.
cars.
So let's ban this. But what happened to the idea that fundamentally I'm a free person, apart from the small levels of regulation, to make society a better place? Now you're just being told, you must do this, you must do that. And I think, and I'm being repetitious, get rid of that bloody Welsh Assembly as well. Get rid of the lot of them.
The devolution is a disaster.
A disaster.
But the car was the ultimate symbol once of freedom and independence, and it's just not viewed that way anymore.
No.
People don't view it that way. There's been a huge culture shift in how people view the motor vehicle.
But
There was also
Have you got
something
a
in the
car,
way-
Alice? Have you got a car?
I don't have a car. I didn't even know how to drive, but I know I can feel the pain of drivers because my dad drives, and it's just unbelievable what they're essentially trying to pedestrianise London.
Yeah.
Which is
Oh,
just
yeah.
ridiculous.
Well, they
That's
are.
right now for
And
ages,
I mean,
yeah.
and I just, this is, as you said, like just a complete power grab by elitists like Sadiq Khan and Mark Drakeford who just do this because they can.
But
I
your
just want
point
that- I
about
just want
freedom...
They're serving an extremist agenda as well.
Yeah, I mean, your point about freedom was absolutely right. I remember, because I'm so old, that as a young man, as I was growing up from a boy, the big threshold to my adulthood was getting a driving licence, to being able to have that independence, that freedom to move around. This is now being eradicated, and I think, Andre, you're absolutely right. We're falling more into a nanny state than we ever have before.
There is another element of abuse, particularly in London. I'm not as familiar with Wales. You've got to remember, Transport for London and Transport for Greater Manchester and all of these bodies are effectively the tubes and the train operators who are now taking over their rivals, their competitors. And so what they're doing is, if you look at Transport for London, the people who ran the tube now run all of transport, and they're deliberately destroying the roads in order to push people onto the tube, to push up their revenue. It's a classic state monopoly situation.
Well, they tell you, don't they, take public transport. By the way, talking about your first cars, a little bit of personal history. My first car was a Morris Minor.
Lovely.
It cost me £5. A year later, because it kept breaking down, I upgraded to a Mini, 25 quid. Those were the days.
Those
You know
were
what, the
days.
craziest thing, though, can I just point out, I would love a Morris Minor as my first car because you know what, it's exempt from the tax charges.
Oh, is it?
It's crazy because, and you know, you'd think that, well, surely old cars who emit much more CO2 would be a target, but no, actually the older cars are exempt. So
There you go.
Well,
I might be
as
driving
a
Morris
former
Minor.
Morris Minor owner, I wouldn't recommend it. It had these two wings that weren't that well attached, and so if I went over a bump, they both went like that. So it was like a back car.
Although I would definitely endorse not only having a car that you can smash up in your first year of driving, but the more rubbish a car it is, the more you'll get to learn about the mechanics.
Yeah.
And that is absolutely classic.
It's a
So
rite of passage.
changing hoses, all
We've got a clip now. Let's watch Mr. Drakeford battling it out with the Welsh Tory leader, Andrew Davies. Take it away, you guys.
You think that you can turn up here this afternoon with a mess that your party has made to the budget of this country, to the reputation of this country around the world, that you promise those people that there will be more to come, and you think you turn up here this afternoon and claim some sort of moral high ground? What sort of world do you belong in?
Well, you've heard of that expression, Welsh windbag. There you are.
You know what? He reminds me, actually. I run most mornings in the park near me, and he reminds me of the guy who shouts at the pigeons I see most mornings.
What a pompous
I've got to
Listen,
say
we've got to move on. We've got to move on. It is your turn, Andre, and I believe you have something to say about the Great British Bake Off.
Put your sombrero away. Because of Mexican Week, they've decided to ban various national dishes from Great British Bake Off. They're saying that potentially it's racist. They said
Cultural
that...
appropriation.
Well, I tell you what I don't understand.
Was it misappropriation?
No,
I never
no,
know.
no.
Because I don't care.
Well, let's be honest with you. I mean, the Mexican contribution to baking is not well known, is it?
Well,
Okay,
I love Mexican food. Very lovely cuisine.
It's not baked.
Well, I thought they probably bake some things, don't they?
Empanadas.
I just find this thing, and nobody has ever been able to explain this to me. And forgive me if I'm being stupid and maybe I missed something.
Don't worry. You're forgiven.
But I don't understand how you can say that you want Britain to be culturally enriched by various cultures coming to the country, and you want to avoid cultural appropriation. Presumably, those two are the opposite, right? And yet you go, oh, isn't it brilliant that Britain's a multicultural society? We can be culturally enriched. Oh, by the way, don't culturally enrich yourself. That's cultural appropriation. I'm convinced that everything I do is wrong in the eyes of the left, which does make me happy.
That's
I think,
because they're right.
Just being, Kevin, what I like about us lot is just being alive offends them.
Don't breathe, Andre.
The people who mainly took offence of this episode were the Americans who were watching. Just fancy that.
What a surprise.
Because
doesn't
America's
surprise me
contribution in
at
Mexico
all.
has been all positive.
But I don't even think it's a thing, cultural appropriation. I think
Rubbish.
I think it's a Twitter phenomenon.
Yeah.
Because there have been a few times where I've been invited onto programmes to debate it, and they've never been able to find someone to defend it. I swear, it is just this utter mirage on Twitter. No one cares.
There's a cultural appropriation row going on in Germany at the Munich Beer Festival because tourists are turning up in these kind of sexy versions of dirndls, and blokes are wearing kind of colourful lederhosen, and the local leader of the area just said, "This is outrageous. It's a cultural appropriation. You can't do." It's like, it's so offensive, so disrespectful. So what? You can wear what you like.
They're the enemies of joy.
Yeah, they are the enemies of joy. Very well
I'll tell you
put.
one thing, though. I'll tell you one thing. There is a position in the City of London, I'm not joking, in the Council Cross Road called the Ale Corner, where you wear lederhosens and sit in beer in order to test the quality of it. It's a genuine elected position.
Sign me up.
I don't.
Sign me up.
Listen, we're going to watch some of the Americans and how they responded to this controversial episode of the Great British Bake Off.
One viewer tweeted, quote, 16 seconds into the Mexican Week episode of #GBBO, and I'm already offended. In response to a clip of Lucas shaking maracas on the episode, another wrote, quote, I just want y'all to understand how racist this is. In addition, the show is catching heat after the show's hosts mispronounced dishes such as guacamole and pico de gallo, and how co-judge Prue Leith comments on how certain cakes look Mexican because they have, quote, bright colors.
Shut up.
Kevin,
up.
can I just say one
And
thing?
this is
to you?
coming- yeah.
The most racist thing you could do to Mexico is invade Texas and take it off them.
Well, you could
right? So
try
as far
that,
as
yeah.
I'm concerned.
And this is coming from the country with the most overt far-right, white supremacist sort of groupings than there are in any other nation in the world.
By the way, to that American lady that you found it all so offensive, who cares if you're offended? It doesn't matter. It's legal to offend you.
Pity
So
the
shut
fool
up. I'll leave it at that.
Pity the fool
Let's
carried
move on.
her.
We've got to move on. It is Alice Grant's go, and you want to nominate Sir Tony Blair. Tell us why.
Unbelievable. So he's now trying to impose a tax on junk food, and which will essentially target the most poorest British households. And it's just unbelievable. He wants to tackle the obesity crisis, but doing this by hiking up prices of food by imposing sugar taxes. I mean, talk about the nanny state, as we've discussed. These kind of interventionist policies have just no place, I think, in our society anymore. We're sick of being subject to these tax hikes, which ultimately affect consumers the most.
Here's what I think about this. Is I despise all policies that are aimed at solving the obesity crisis by taxing people on food. What I say is politicians, those idiots in Westminster, it's what I eat or I drink or I smoke has got nothing to do with them. If I want to spend my entire life eating chips, drinking beer and smoking 60 Marlboro a day, that's my business, not theirs. And this is the enemy of liberty.
How much power does Tony Blair now have? 800 members of staff at the Tony Blair Institute.
Yeah.
We were talking this week about the fact that he got Keir Starmer allegedly to meet Emmanuel Macron to get Britain to rejoin the European Union. This man has got his fingers in a global pie, and I actually think it's incredibly dangerous.
Don't you think, Alice, as a young
a
person,
year as well.
as a young person, don't you think these politicians should get their noses out of our life? I mean, how dare they tell us what to eat and drink? What the hell has it got to do with them?
No, but exactly. I think we're living in an age where where politics has become so centralised to such a small elite. And these people, like Tony Blair, are, part of these kind of global organisations like his institute, and they do have an effect on policy. The problem is that they are affecting our laws. They are affecting legislation in Westminster, and they shouldn't be because they are totally unaccountable to us, and there is no transparency.
Because they persuade every political party to agree.
This is a man who had criminal behaviour when he was in office, and what is he doing now?
I'm just saying that for the lawyers,
who the British public despise, and what is he doing lecturing us now and actually affecting policy?
But I think there's more to it. I mean, Alice, I totally agree with you. I think that the key thing from my perspective is that it's not about educating, and your point, Kev, is right on the nail of it. It's our freedom of choice.
It's freedom.
If you want to try and help
freedom.
people, educate them, give them alternatives, give them options rather than having, fast food. What are the other options? What are the what's the negative impact?
But that's treating people like adults.
Well, of course it is.
And they can't
the problem
do that.
with the guys is they're enforcing it. And Alice, I think it's it's one of those stealthy things which is snuck in. I didn't hear about this until you've mentioned it today.
Even more dangerous because he's no longer elected. That's the critical point.
Exactly.
It's not even a Drakeford.
How many unelected officials have a say in our politics? So many. I mean, we're talking about whether we're talking about the World Health Organization or back when we were in the EU and our laws are essentially being made in a foreign country. I mean, this is something unprecedented, really, and I think it's very worrying, especially because ultimately, who's being enriched by these policies?
It's social engineering. Right now there's high taxes on sugar products. These are, Tony Blair said, we've got to make junk food unaffordable for the masses. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, so that they can make responsible decisions. No, you're not allowing them to make the decisions. You're making the food they want to eat unaffordable and therefore forcing them not to eat it. That is just basically it's tyranny. It's tyranny.
There's punitive instinct and it's regressive. These are regressive taxes.
Anyway, I've got a message for Tony Blair. I've got a message for Tony Blair. For God's sake, retire. We're going to break now. Welcome back to Plank of the Week. I'm not Mike Graham, I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and it is my turn for my nomination. And I'm going to nominate the Financial Conduct Authority. This is the city watchdog that looks after banking and monitors financial affairs. They have been investigating and looking into the scandal of debanking. We all remember Nigel Farage alerted the nation to this syndrome that banks are closing down customers' accounts for political reasons because they don't like their politics. To be fair, it doesn't exclusively happen to right-wingers, but mainly it does. Now, after this comprehensive investigation, the Financial Conduct Authority has come back with a report that concludes there is no proof that accounts are being closed over political opinions. Well, what about Nigel Farage? Nigel Farage proved categorically that his accounts at Coutts, the top people's bank, were closed because they didn't like his politics. And if that is not the case, why did the chief executive of Coutts, Dame Alison Gray, have to quit, have to walk the plank after admitting that Nigel Farage's accounts were closed down because they didn't ally to the bank's values? And who cares about values of a bank, by the way?
Kevin, we live in a country, it's extremely dangerous, by the way. We live in a country where regulators can't regulate. In the 2008 financial crisis, the Financial Services Authority was a complete disaster, so they changed its name to the Financial Conduct Authority, and that's pretty much all they did. But remember, the energy regulators, who've got an energy price cap that they always put up, the water regulators who ban you from using the water and still bill you for it. These regulators are terrible. A governor of the Bank of England who sits there and says, I can't regulate inflation, that's literally your job, pal.
I can tell you a story.
Added to which, the whole point of the FCA and its whole new sort of position, and I've worked on some investigations with clients of mine who are in the money management business and financial sort of portfolio management, where they've had their accounts choked. Basically, money's held with no reason or explanation. And the people who should really be conducting this investigation is the banking ombudsman, who I've worked with as well in unfair cases. And they've been fantastic. They've been really good and really fair and level-headed. Why the FCA is leading it, why the FCA are the people, and with no grounds when there's certainly documentary evidence of people like Nigel Farage.
It's just not true to say there's... It's just absolutely not true to say there's no proof accounts are being closed for political reasons. That's why Dame Alison Gray had to walk the plank. It's as simple as that. Let's watch Nigel Farage reacting to the news that the FCA has decided nothing to see here, no problem. Let's watch.
They have been putting huge pressure on the banks and financial institutions to follow the diversity and inclusion agenda. Yes, of course, that matters far more than protecting customers' money. And because they're so political, they can't see bias where it exists. And what a farce. You say to a bank, have you debanked people for political reasons? They say no, and the FCA is, well, there we are. That's the end of the matter. Well, it isn't. It's a complete and utter farce. It is a total whitewash. It is a joke.
A whitewash and a joke, and he's right. As I say, Nigel's case alone proves accounts are being closed for political reasons. The FCA has decided that they're not. So it's not true. It's a lie.
Debanking in general is such a big problem. I mean, Nigel Farage is a very high-profile person who was able to alert the public to what was going on. But there are plenty of ordinary people who've just been told, computer says no, you're losing your bank account. They have no idea why.
Yeah, they won't tell anyone.
But
that's a scandal in itself.
In the old days, the regulator of financial services organisations was the Bank of England, retired bankers themselves. I have to be honest with you, and I don't want to be overly disparaging to people, but if you want a career in finance in the City of London, the dross are the people who are going to go to the FCA. Not the best people. The top people are going to end up in the big banks. And actually what you've got is people who are too thick to regulate the banks and the financial institutions.
What you've got here, Alice, I would be interested in your views. You've got a left-wing organisation sitting in judgment on a left-wing bank or a left-wing series of banks and coming up with a left-wing conclusion. The FCA is not independent. It's part of the problem.
No, we all know. We've known for a while that the city is very much politically aligned towards leftist agenda. But here I think the important social point is that we're talking about a politician here, one of the biggest politicians in British public. affairs that's been a target of this. Yeah. So
but it's
how
not
is
just
any
him, of course.
single one of us safe? If this is happening to people like Nigel, of course it's going to happen to ordinary people, and we won't have a voice to be able to confront this.
I think what's so spurious about this investigation or this review by the FCA is that those that have been debanked, what they haven't come back with, from what I've seen so far, and maybe there is information which will be released in time, is the reasonings why they were debanked. Yeah. It's not a case of, OK, it wasn't for political reasons. Well, why were they debanked? What were the reasons for it? What were the justifications? What were the explanations? Yeah, and again, it's our liberties to a certain degree being removed.
I'll conclude on a little personal story. I was once called before the FDA, the old FDA, in a share trading scandal, and they were investigating it, and I was called in because I sat fairly near some people who were accused of these nefarious offences when I was the show business editor of the Daily Mirror. So I sat before them and said, well, share dealing, share. I said, listen, guys, I don't know what you're talking about. In my department, we spell share C-H-E-R. Right, time for Will Geddes, your next nomination.
OK, so this one, again, another gear-grinding situation of wokeness, which is prevailing. And I can't wait for the death of wokeness, to be absolutely honest. And this is Braun, the
gadget maker.
The gadget maker makes men's
electronic
trimmers.
Giant. Yeah.
I don't think I have a Braun in my home, but
you've got brains, not brawn.
Thank you.
There we
He's
go.
here all week.
But they've come out with the latest advert, which is to advertise a men's beard trimmer, where they've chosen to use a transsexual who's had let's add
trans
injury.
woman.
Trans woman. I always get confused, but trans woman. I think they are too. That they've actually got someone who's a trans woman.
There's a picture of our friend
had
there.
A double mastectomy. I mean, you add insult to injury. You couldn't get more repulsive than this situation in terms of branding. Who in their right mind signed off on this campaign? I mean, had they not seen what happened at Budweiser? Had they not seen what happened to Costa Coffee, various other brands that have seemed to jump on this bandwagon? But the thing that really upsets me the most is I can count some good female friends who have, for various reasons, had to have mastectomies. To make this so sort of repugnantly visible within a commercial for a beard trimmer, I mean,
by the way, you say you got confused, Will. We all get confused. Because it's not a trans woman, it's a trans man. You know, so difficult, all of this, navigating this.
But I will say one thing, Kevin, that really upsets me. And, you know, it's hard for me to comment because I don't know the situation. But to me, one of the things that is so egregious about mastectomies because women feel less feminine as a result of it.
Yeah.
They shouldn't do,
yeah.
but they do. But then to glorify it as a symbol of masculinity, I think is a really despicable thing.
Worse than that, though. Worse than that. It's insulting and distressing to the many women who've had to have double mastectomies.
Correct.
That's right.
And indeed, let's be fair, to trans men who've also had double mastectomies. It's a very serious surgery. And to highlight it in a trite advert for a male product is just ridiculous, just like Costa Coffee the other week. And what I would say is it's a male beard trimmer, hair trimmer. Here's an idea. You want to advertise it? Get a bloke to do it.
Yeah.
How about that?
No, that's too easy. That's way too easy.
Sorry, am I missing something?
No, but it's a very shallow idea.
No, but he is.
And gender. It's saying a woman is breasts and a man is a penis. And if you remove it, you can become the other thing. When we all know it's a lot more complex than that.
Yeah. Come on, like, what is wrong with our society? It's just
you're right, Alice. It's just I mean, the world has gone mad. That's my slogan for the modern world. Stop the madness. Just stop it. Let's move on. Candice Holdsworth, you have your nomination. Something to do with a street in central London.
Yes, so I've nominated TfL, which is one of my favourites.
We love TfL, don't we?
So this week they did something amazing. They decided, as part of an advertising campaign for Fashion Week, to rename Bond Street Burberry Street. And they confused everybody. People kept missing their station.
Burberry gave some cash for this,
Yes, it was part of an ad campaign. And, I mean, you think that is the primary role of a transport company is to get people to their destination, not confuse them. This is also a company that bans advertising unhealthy food on the tube.
Yeah, what about that wedding cake advert recently?
Oh, I didn't see that.
Well,
What
it was for a stage play called, I think it's called The Wedding, and it had a
Tony
couple.
and Tina's
Yeah,
wedding.
there's a couple on the top of a cake.
Yeah,
just
yeah.
a poster.
Like the little
Anyway,
mannequins
the Transport for London demanded you got rid of the cake because it's unhealthy.
It would be
No,
particularly...
he's-
I'm serious.
Kevin, can I tell you?
If you didn't laugh, you'd cry.
Kevin, I saw the cake. It was brought into TalkTV, and it would be definitely unhealthy. It was made of wood.
Well, yeah, well, that is unhealthy. But the whole concept of the cake was ruled to be illegal.
But they're treating their customers with contempt, and I think it is a bit of a theme with this evening, with stuff we've been talking about. It's like with banking, with driving, with travelling on the tube. It's just the people who use it and who pay the money are being treated terribly and are being treated like cash cows.
I mean, TfL making a few quid, not a bad idea, because Sadiq Khan, the mayor, has run it into the ground. It needs money, hence the ULEZ expansion scheme. But a lot of tourists, in terms of Burberry Street, they turned up. They said, "Where are we?" Totally confused.
There's an established system where you say things like Egham for Royal Holloway College or whatever, or, where you say Ascot for the racecourse. You don't change the name of the actual place. You just put underneath the sponsor's name.
Well, so for a few quid, you sort of rename Birmingham. Call it Leeds or something and see what happens. I mean, it's unbelievable, isn't it?
I mean, I just feel sorry for all the tourists who got completely confused, who had no idea where they were. And I mean, I just don't understand the decision-making at TfL. They seem to make the most demented decisions.
Well, the decision-maker is Sadiq Khan. Enough said. Time now for another break. Welcome back. I'm not Mike Graham. Mike Graham will be back in the hot seat, of course, next week. I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and we are going through our planks of the week. And next up with his nomination is Andre Walker. Take it away, Andre.
Now, listen, I've got to say to you, a classic never dies. And also, I do like people who are into ginger morons. I just want to say that. But Meghan Markle...
And we all are, aren't we?
Meghan Markle has got to be added to the list once again. And actually, we've made jokes about her and the way she's fairly pathetic, the way she got beaten by the whale noises for her podcast. But actually now her father is in the final few years of his life. He's had a stroke. He is now begging to be able to see his grandchildren. As he's pointed out, their other grandfather is able to see the grandchildren. And look, for all of her narcissism, for all of her obnoxiousness, for all of her accusing us of racism when we've done absolutely nothing to her, for all of her abuse of her position, for all of her rudeness to the staff, for all of her humiliation of the Queen, for all the fact that she demanded...
It's going on for much longer.
But for all of that, it's her bloody father. So for once in her life, can she do the right thing?
I agree. Don't you think? I mean, it's so weird that Thomas Markle... first of all, has never seen his grandchildren.
Nope.
And even more weirdly, has never met his son-in-law, Harry. Harry, it's just strange. And Meghan is a strange woman. But here is Thomas Markle talking to Good Morning Britain.
It's a cruel thing to do to our grandparent, not to just me, to the King of England as well. Denied the right to see a grandchild.
Well, there you are. That's Thomas Markle. I feel sorry for him. People say, oh, well, he did a deal with the paparazzi. What does he know? He's this old guy. He's never dealt with the media before, plunged into this media firestorm because his daughter's going out with Prince Harry, lives down in Mexico. Some pap turns up and says, I'll give you $20 to pose up for these pictures. And for that, she condemns him forever. What's your feeling about Meghan Markle, Alice?
I mean, that video was just tragic, that, and especially, Andre, when you mentioned that, this is a man in the last years of his life. Like, that is such a...
And you can hear the effects of the stroke.
Yeah.
It is sad, isn't it?
It's heartbreaking.
I mean,
It is. I think that's such a good point, that Harry has never met him. I mean, that's
weird.
Odd.
That is strange.
Do you think he'd make an extra special effort to have done that? But he never did. Maybe he thought he was beneath him. I don't know. I'm just speculating.
Well, there was that moment, Will, when he was supposed to be coming over for the wedding all those years ago, and he then had that heart attack, of course.
Yeah.
But whether or not he actually would have come, I think it's a moot point. I'm not sure he was ever even invited. No. She has sent him to Siberia.
What I find bizarre is, and I've facilitated meetings between people who don't want to be seen in public eye. They don't want to do it behind closed doors. And it would not be difficult for Prince Harry to set up a clandestine, covert meeting, him, Meghan, the father, sit down, make peace, bring the grandchildren, and it could be done all out of the glare of publicity. But evidently is not happening. So, you know, there's either, or if she's got such a genuine problem with her dad for some reason that we're not aware of, then maybe that needs to be made aware. But we need to be made aware.
She thinks he betrayed her to the press.
But
they used to be, Andre, they used to be close when she was a kid. And the way she treats him, I think, is like cold-hearted on an epic scale.
But I'll tell you what I thought she was really awful, and this is telling about the woman. So I don't know a great deal about the Markles, but let me just give you this example. She was unable to come over for the Duke of Edinburgh's funeral because I think either the baby had just been born or she was heavily pregnant. So she, quote-unquote, demanded a role within it. Now, the reason we know this is because her press officers told British newspapers she'd demand a role. And in the end, she put this, she had this card which was on top of the coffin. So she's harassing an old woman when her husband's died.
Yeah.
This man said the worst thing about her, at least Wallis Simpson kept her mouth shut. That was the opinion of the Duke of Edinburgh on this woman, and she's demanding a role at this funeral. Horrendous.
I mean, the other thing this is not to do with the dad, but I'd love to throw this question out to any of you. Can you name me any one of the winners of the Invictus Games?
No.
But you can tell us all about what Meghan Markle was wearing and what Harry was doing. It's completely shadowed the event.
The other thing that she did, which I thought was really despicable, and I'm sorry, I do not believe her argument here. She said that her son didn't get a title. Well, actually, he did when his grandfather became king, but when he was born, that was not the case. OK, but he was always able to use the title Earl of Dumbarton or Earl Dumbarton. She said, we didn't use that because it had dumb in the name and they did it deliberately. She must have known that she is the Countess of Dumbarton.
My favourite
Markle
is Meghan's cousin. I've forgotten his name.
Oh, the weed man.
But he grows cannabis on a massive level.
Brilliant.
And it's called Markle Sparkle is the product. So, there you go.
Love it.
Now, we're going to move on. It's Alice Grant's go again. And you're already going for a lot of Labour leaders today,
well,
aren't you?
the plank of the week.
Which one have you gone for this time?
It's got to be Keir Starmer.
Yes.
I mean, this man is now telling the British press that if he was Prime Minister, he would renegotiate the Brexit deal. I mean, it's unbelievable, especially when you consider that this is really just a very thinly veiled attempt at trying to get us back into closer cooperation with the European Union in defiance of the people of what we voted in 2016. And he was a proponent of the second referendum. So why on earth would we trust him when he says that he's just interested in aligning us a little bit closer economically?
A little bit.
And, you know, and actually you're right, because then there's people in his party like David Lammy.
What's he doing in Paris?
Talking.
He's like that with Macron. He wants us back in.
This is even more concerning. People like David Lammy are talking about integrating us into the defence and cybersecurity aspects of the EU. Which
David
would
Lammy
be
should
a
be
disaster,
banned.
especially considering the geopolitical situation at the moment. Do we really want to align ourselves with the European Union?
He is the only person ever to have surrendered to the French. I mean, it's just extraordinary.
But also, what is a leader of the opposition doing meeting the president?
Undermining Britain.
I guess who brokered that meeting, that summit in Paris? Tony Blair. Tony Blair is pulling all of Starmer's strings.
Yeah,
Starmer doesn't give a damn about anything. Yeah. He just wants to win the next election. Yeah. And for all his many faults, the one thing Blair was good at was winning elections.
But did you read that story in the Mail today? They were saying that that's what Tony Blair thinks. He thinks this is an election winner. He thinks there's lots of people disillusioned with Brexit. Of course, all the forever Remain
He's
people.
wrong.
Absolutely not. And also, when you consider that when Johnson was negotiating this agreement at the time, there was the whole pressure of the British people behind him. There was the media. I mean, this was the best deal he could have achieved at the time. And this man thinks he can just walk back into negotiating with the EU in good faith.
So last week he goes to The Hague to cosy up to the EU with his useless migrant plan, which the EU said, get lost, that's crap. This week he goes to Paris to cosy up to Macron. And you're right, this is what I believe. The reason Blair and Starmer think this is what the British people want, closer ties with Europe, getting back into the EU, is because they live in an echo chamber of Remainiacs. So that bunch of oddballs, the shadow cabinet, they're Remainiacs. So all Starmer ever hears is, we've got to get back into Europe, we've got to get back into Europe. And he thinks that's reflective of what the people of Britain think. Well, I've got bad news for you, Keir. They don't think that. That's why they voted to leave, you idiot.
Exactly.
But what he did... Sorry, go on.
No, well, I was just going to say, I hope this is a policy that really turns voters off him, and I think
it will.
I think it absolutely will,
will,
because when you hear him talking about closer ties, it's just that's not what we wanted. That's not what we voted for.
When he and Burko went over to meet Michel Barnier to tell him to give Britain
there's in that blast from the past. I forgot about Barnier.
But they went to Michel Barnier in order to ask for Britain to get a worse deal. In the United States of America, that sort of negotiation is a criminal offence. I believe it should be a criminal offence in Britain.
Yeah, we don't want closer ties with the EU. We want less close ties with the EU. That's what the British people want. That's what we voted for. We voted to become a sovereign nation that can make its own decisions.
Right.
Keir Starmer is a globalist who cannot conceive of Britain making its own decisions. He has to go cap in hand to Europe to ask what it is that we should do.
It's a humiliation for our country, and it's not in our national interest.
Yeah, and now he's talking about... he's denying this, but
women.
Apparently... the talks revolves around the possibility of Britain becoming an associate member of the EU, which would mean we'd be bossed around and we get none of the benefits.
Yeah, exactly.
And we chip in.
Yeah, no, the direction the EU is going is something that is very concerning. I think in their hubris, like all empires which kind of overreach, they will ultimately collapse. It's unsustainable the way they're going.
Yeah.
And we don't want to be part of it. We have to look after our own national interests.
Yeah, it's a sclerotic organisation that's on its way out. It's time for another break. Welcome back. I'm Kevin O'Sullivan. I'm not Mike Graham. Mike will be back here next week. Never fear. We've still got one nomination to go, and then I will make my decision as to who really is the plank of the week. Here's a strong contender, though. Diane Abbott, the Labour dinosaur, former cabinet minister, I believe, certainly shadow cabinet minister. Used to be shadow Home Secretary, incredibly. Anyway, she recently was kicked out of the Parliamentary Labour Party for writing a letter to The Observer, which Keir Starmer says was a clear case of anti-Semitism. She said that Jewish people don't suffer racism like other minority groups, like black people and things like that, which is the classic far-left view of racism against Jewish people. It's not as bad as racism against other people. Well, it is. And Starmer quite rightly said, well, that is anti-Semitism. You are hereby expelled from the Parliamentary Labour Party. She, like Corbyn, he has been as well, but they both remain members of the Labour Party, so Starmer could go further. But anyway, Diane Abbott has now launched this serious, vicious attack on Keir Starmer, saying he's trying to wreck my parliamentary career. Incredibly, she should probably bow out while going's good, but it looks like she does want to stand again as the MP for Hackney and Stoke Newington in North London. And she says that Starmer is sort of preventing her or ruining her chances of winning by kicking her out of the party. I would say that is a clear case of anti-Semitism, and Diane Abbott should not be pointing the finger at Keir Starmer. She is the architect of our own downfall.
Yeah.
These days, I mean, in the past, she was quite impressive. I mean, she was an impressive character many decades ago. Now, she can't... She cannot open her mouth without putting her foot in it.
Yeah. And it's usually two left shoes, isn't it?
Yeah.
She puts her foot in it.
Yeah, that's why she wears wrong shoes.
It always makes me laugh the way she goes, when I was at school, people thought I was thick, but I've proved them wrong by being a Labour MP. No, you haven't, love. Let's just be clear.
And like a true socialist, she said to her son to public school. Here's Diane trying to add up.
We would find the money to recruit the 10,000 police people by we would find the money because we'd look at capital gains tax. The Tories have cut capital gains tax and we want to restore it. And that would give us, I think, 170... We would find the money
Well, the people of Hackney and Stoke Newington, do you want that person to be your MP? Because I would rethink if you do.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much confusion on the left, especially about this issue of anti-Semitism. I mean, I think Keir Starmer, to his credit, is trying to bring clarity to it. But under Jeremy Corbyn and with Diane Abbott, who was such a close ally of him, it's amazing to me how they just could not see how what they were saying was anti-Semitic. I mean, it's just conventional wisdom to them. And even at The Observer, they printed the letter, so they clearly thought it was actually
well, they didn't even notice. And by the way, the
say.
other newspapers put it on the front page. The Observer didn't even notice it as a story.
These people are still on their gap year. That's the problem with
Yeah.
them.
Never-ending gap year.
On their gap years, yeah. don't forget, Corbyn and Diane Abbott used to go out with each other.
Oh, come on,
I mean,
Kevin.
the couple from
it's a
hell.
family show.
What do you think about Diane Abbott, Alice?
Well, it's interesting because what I'm noticing is that there's obviously the old kind of faction of the Labour Party that we're used to, the outright socialists, but I actually find them a lot, I think, electorally easier to deal with in a way than this kind of the new Blairite party, and I much prefer actually just the honest, like, socialists than those who are kind of masquerading as middle of the road, but are actually bringing in policies.
You can't beat a good old-fashioned anti-Semite.
Dangerous. I don't like the Keir Starmers of the Labour Party. I think that they're very, like, moderate, very undisciplined, very, like, they have no backbone, they have no spine.
Well, actually,
you know, I prefer it when you stand up for something, even if it's totally wrong, like Corbyn or Abbott.
Actually, Alice, if you read Margaret Thatcher's book, she said that she never had any respect for Kinnock because she said it was a fundamentally disreputable process to make the Labour Party look like it was something it was not in order to get it elected.
Yeah.
This is what Peter Hitchens has always said, and it's what he said about Tony Blair at the time. And it's like we're in, and someone said in the Times the other day, they called Keir Starmer a 90s tribute act. And it's so true.
I love that.
They've run out of ideas. That's why they're looking backwards. I mean, it's a very confused movement, I think. I don't think they really have a vision for the future.
No, they just have to go diametrically opposed to whatever the Conservatives are doing for them to say, we are different. Yeah.
But just a parting thought on Jeremy Corbyn and Diane Abbott when they were a couple many years ago. They went on holiday. They went on a motorcycling holiday to East Germany.
No.
Sums it up, doesn't it?
In the sidecar.
Hilarious.
Is it. And I now have to
Please
choose who's going to win this. And after careful consideration, very strong contenders, great nominations from all of you. But I'm afraid it has to be our old favourite, Mr. Mayor, Sadiq Khan.
Can't go wrong with Sadiq.
Well, that's it. So congratulations, Sadiq. You've done it again.
Well done,
Thank you.
Come on.
Thank you very much. Mike is back next week. Thank you to Andre Walker, to Alice Grant, to Candice Holdsworth, and, of course, the brilliant Will Geddes. This has been Plank of the Week. Just when I was getting used to my show, What Just Happened, being on TalkTV every Friday night at 10:30, they go and change it. I'm furious. They've moved it to 8:30 every Friday. TalkTV, What Just Happened. I am furious.